Good afternoon. My name is Fawzy. I'm one of the deans in the school. I am responsible for academic affairs. So I'm here really to help explain, I guess, the salary and the paycheck. But I'm also happy to answer any questions. It's not a lecture. So you can interrupt me anytime you want to. Raise your hand and we can stop. If you have a personal question, you can come and see me after this or anytime later. So don't be embarrassed. There's no silly question. I'm happy to answer any one of those. In fact, I'm surprised to see some of you here because some associate professor should have known by now what the salary structure is, but there's still some of them are here. No, you can stay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and explain really the structure of the salary composition, how it is negotiated, and then, oh, I see even a professor back there. And how it's negotiated, and then what the paycheck really reflects, and try and explain some of the confusion away. So let's start. And again, just stop me, raise your hand, or shout, and I'll stop. In the negotiation process, and department by department changes how they do the negotiations. And I'll explain that in a minute. The salary really is made out of an X prime, and this is the most complicated part, and I'll come to that in a minute, plus a Y, and it becomes total negotiated salary. So, and then beyond the total negotiated salary, there's something called the Z, which I'll explain in detail. X is very simple. X is step and rank. It's in a table that you can get from the Academic Affairs website. So it's set by the university. Everybody has the same X. There's no discrepancy in the X depending on your step and rank. So what is the X prime? And this is very important for most of you because this X and X prime is really the big X, kind of. It's your retirement. The retirement is based on X and X prime. And you will hear a lot of description of this X prime. Somebody would use retirement factor. That's the retirement factor. Somebody would say APU, academic program unit. That's the academic program unit. And from each department, there are lots of different departments with different academic program units. It goes all the way from 0.1, so you can retire at 110% of your X, to 1.8, 180% of your X. And depending on your department, what program unit you're in, and each one of you should have, by now, know what program unit you're in. Basic science has different program unit. Then clinical sciences, each department has a program unit. But this is very important. And the two combined two become the big X that your retirement is based on. The Y is really a big item that differentiates what you do in addition to your X. It's mostly, do we have anybody here in research series? Okay. In research, it's a little bit different from clinical. In research series, really, the Y is most of the time the X prime. It doesn't go beyond that because there's no clinical activities beyond the X and X prime. But some departments do provide a Y from grant sources. That's really in the research series, if we focus on research. The Y is paid out from grants. In the clinical departments, most of the Y is paid out of clinical earnings in addition to grants. So you could really, so this could be grants or clinical earnings that make up the Y. And then TNS, total negotiated salary. Now, why is total negotiated salary different in some departments from others? Because in some departments, we encourage the departments to put most of the clinical earnings in their Z, and I'll describe in a minute why. So in the check that you get, one of the questions that I was asked is to describe the check that you get. In the check that you get 1/12 of your TNS, nothing to do with your Z. So the TNS that you negotiate every year, in fact, we finalized the negotiation for the upcoming year just now, you will get 1/12 of that. Then the Z, and I'll tell you the description of what the Z does. So let's talk about what happens in the check. In the check, you get to elect what to do about your retirement in addition to what the university gives you. So there's something called 403B, which is an elective system where you can contribute, and it's contributed pre-tax. So in your check, if you read the check, there's a top part, and then there's a left corner part. In the left corner part would be, if you had elected to take $403, would be pre-tax subtraction. There's also going to be a subtraction for your health insurance. There's two parts to health. One part, university contributes, and you will see what the university contributes towards your health insurance. And one part, you will be contributing to your health insurance. And then some individuals will also have a 457. It's the same thing as 403, but the university gives us an option to put aside some money in addition to our retirement from the university, which is pre-tax. So it subtracts from what you pay taxes on it. You'll eventually pay taxes when you draw off it, but in the beginning you are pre-taxed. In this same left-hand corner, you'll have health, you'll have the pre-tax contribution, you will have dental and vision if you are eligible for those. So this is what you would get for your TNS. Any questions about that? Yes, please.
The thing that's called the delta, how is that different than
The delta is the Y. It's the same as the Y.
Do you only use the 457 if you've maxed out the 403B?
No, you can use them both.
What's the difference?
The difference really is that you can have two pockets that you can add to, because there's limits on what you can contribute. And the limit goes up by age, and so the university has this opportunity for you to be able to save in both places at the same time. And then when you retire, you have this accumulated pre-tax, then you pay taxes for it.
The two are just different because the max and the 403B.
Correct. Yes, there's some criteria in them that I really cannot tell you. But the best thing about it is that you can contribute to both places. Yes?
It might be important to look at that because you can take loans against your 403B, but you cannot against
Yeah.
your 457. There are some important differences.
So I think the best place to go to is if you go to the CRP website, and under retirement, there's all the descriptives of all these things. Because that's important to know what the regulations are. I don't know them specifically. But I know at least one of the advantages that you can contribute to both places at the same time. Yes, please.
Is the TNS adjusted for cost of living increases or inflation over time?
Okay, there are two ways that it is done. The first way, we have not been able to increase the value of the X for the last 3 years and even for the coming year. Because of what's happening in the state, the value of the X has stayed stable. But a lot of departments have asked for, and we've said, as long as the faculty member has the resources and has done their job and qualifies, they can increase a little bit in their Y to make up for that fact that we have been stable without any increases. But the cost of living traditionally comes in X, the X value. Now let's explain the X because it's very important to differentiate. Anybody with FTEs here? One. Okay. Two. So the FTE people, it's very specific. We get these dollars from the state. They're the same level as step and rank, but the dollars come from the state. The researchers, or a lot of people in residence, get their dollars from research grants first. And we always fill the first X and X prime first. So the grants support X and X prime. And they support them by percent effort. It's very important to differentiate. In grants, you have to be able to document that you're spending percent effort to justify that payment. For the clinical departments, a lot of the time they have a combination of clinical earnings and grants to make up the X and X prime and the Y. Now, the only problem with this model for clinical departments now is the recontribution to the retirement. People like me have had the advantage for 20 years of not paying into the retirement system. The retirement system was well funded, so we didn't have to contribute. Over the last 3 years, the retirement system contribution had started. So we started first by 1.5%, then 3%. Now it's coming up to 7%. So that's a big number that we have to pay into our retirement. But it's a number that we'll eventually benefit from. But unfortunately, for those that are in the clinical comp series, that most of their salaries come from clinical earnings, they're both the employer and employee, because there are two parts to the contribution to the retirement. One is what we pay into it and what we get back, and what would the employer pay into it. If I have an FTE, the employer is the university, so the university pays into it for my 10%. And for the research, you can add that to your request when you update your request to add the contribution. But for the clinical earnings people, this comes from their own earnings. So that has become a big challenge for a lot of the junior faculty that are fundamentally covered by clinical earnings. Any questions about that? Because the contribution to the retirement is a very, very important thing that is happening. It's already been passed. It's already been approved. It's happening. Yes?
When you say 7%, is that 7% of what?
Of your X and X prime. That is why I mentioned earlier that we encourage people that are able to afford not having their TNS paid on the 1/12 to move some of the clinical earnings to Y, because then you don't have to pay a lot of that. And for some people, that's actually what they do. They move. Now, in some departments, there's another advantage. Have we finished TNS? I can talk about Z for a minute. Yes, please. Yes. Well, for the last 20 years, we, as faculty members, I've been here for a long time, we got the advantage of not having to contribute to our retirement system. In most places, people contribute to their own retirement system. We didn't have to because the retirement system was over-contributed to. There was enough funds in the retirement system that they didn't need our contribution. So they exempted everybody, staff and faculty, from contributing to the retirement. 3 years ago, it became evident the retirement system as it is right now is not fully funded, and recontribution to the retirement was necessary.
Okay, this is essentially a pension plan?
It's a pension plan.
And is it a lifelong pension plan after you retire?
Exactly.
And do you have to contribute a certain minimum number of years to be in that?
Yes. There are actually two magic numbers. The first magic number is 5 years of service, and you become vested in the retirement system. The second magic number is 20 years of service, and that is really to be vested in health also. But let's differentiate that, because that's a very important differentiation. The retirement system for your pension, as of now, is guaranteed. For health, they're talking about in the future. This is not a guarantee that in the future they might change the rules to say that we have to also contribute as retirees to our health. It's not yet set. There was a committee in OP that was looking at all the health benefits, and one of them was a recommendation that there would be a basic figure number that they will give every retiree, and then if you want to upgrade to something else, then you have to pay the difference. The final decision has not been made yet. But for pension purposes, when I say contribute to the retirement system, I'm talking about pension. Yes, please.
So if you don't have an FTE,
yes,
you have to contribute to your retirement system solely. Is that correct?
Correct.
Regardless if you have done X amount of years of service.
correct.
And the only way to get an FTE would be then to be in the research series or in the
No, actually, to get an FTE for School of Medicine, you have to be in the regular series. Yes.
I'm still not quite clear about the X prime concept. You said Y equals to delta.
No. X prime is separate from Y.
So is the X prime part paid by your brand if you are basic science?
Yes. X prime is, it has three different terms that we use for X prime. One is APU. That's the most common term, academic program unit. And each one of you should know which academic program unit you're in. The second one, they talk about retirement factor. That's the X prime, or X prime. The reason we use X prime is those two are considered really a big X. You cannot have a negotiated salary less than X and X prime. But it could be just X and X prime. But it could not be less than that.
So is the X prime part of delta or separate?
Well, that's why I'm separating it. Don't mix them together. X prime, this is the delta, the Y. X prime now is considered a requirement as part of your big X that has basic X plus the retirement factor together.
I understand separately. The thing is that right now, if you are basic science faculty, your X prime and the Y both come from your grant.
Yes.
If your grant ended, what happened to your Y? Of course, disappeared. What happened to your X?
Well, you have to find a way to pay it out of your salary savings or something. There's no guarantee for faculty to continue. The departments have different ways of handling it. Some departments require the centers as a group. Now I can discuss psychiatry specifically. The center is responsible to help you at least for 1 year transition. Yes, please.
But X prime is a factor. It's a factor that you multiply X by. It's not an
Correct.
absolute amount.
Correct.
So maybe that will help clarify.
Yes, it's a factor, and the factor changes from 0.1 to 0.8, depending on which department and which academic program unit you're in. And it's different. For every individual, in basic science is different, to clinical science, it's different. Yes?
To clarify for some of the other faculty, the X is really what you call the 1900, correct?
Only for those individuals that have FTEs. For those individuals that don't have FTEs, the X is still the same value as what you would get in 19900, but it's coming from lots of different sources. In some departments, the departments contribute some 19900 towards your X, but not the full X value. For our clinical comp, for instance, in psychiatry, that's what we do. In fact, we buy time from them using 19900 for their teaching responsibility. But the majority of the people, if they don't have an FTE, the X has to come either from grants or from clinical earnings. Yes, please.
So is your pension based upon just your
X and X prime.
At the time of your academic rank and step, at the time of your...
That's a very important question. No, it's actually better than that. It's based on your highest 3 years. The reason why, a lot of us, maybe at the last 3 years of our service, have not been able to get grants and things, so our Y might be reduced. But what we had done in the past counts. So it's based on your highest 3 years, the average of your highest 3 years throughout all your service. Not your last, your highest 3.
If you separate from the university before the 5 years, you lose all the contributions.
They give them to you, but you're not vested. The word is vested. But you get what you have contributed, but you're not vested.
And if you stay in the UC system, is this all sort of
Yes.
throughout the UC system?
Yes. It transfers from one UC campus to the other UC campus.
I was going to add that you have to have a continuity of service.
Yeah, you have to have continuity of service, but it transfers. Your service credit, we can talk about the retirement for a minute because it's very important. The retirement is based on, so what we just talked about, it's based on your X value plus prime, okay, times years of service. So that's very important, the years of service, times a factor. And the factor you will see in a catalog, the factor goes up from 2 to 2.5 depending on age. And it maxes at 60. So that's an important variable. So it's your X and X prime value times years of service times a factor. Very, very simple. And so when we talk about your average of 3 years, it's what drives this number. Then you have years of service, then you have your factor. The combination of the three becomes how much you retire.
Sorry, for the uneducated among us, what does it mean to vest?
Vest means that you have some money in the university. Okay, there are two ways that you get retirement. One is an annuity, which is a monthly check. And the other way is you can get a lump sum. If you decide you want to leave the university after 5 years, you can get a lump sum value of your retirement. When you get vested, you can keep that money. It earns interest until you're ready to take it out. If you're not vested, they force you to take it out. Yes?
In a 5-year period, if you are in a point of time where you are in a leave without pay,
yes.
will they get...
It doesn't count towards your years of service. Years of service is only years that you're being paid for. Yeah. Yes?
I guess I'm still not clear on how the medical school provides the department's guidelines on setting the TNS. Do we look at national averages for clinical faculty?
Yes. Yes, there's a AAMC table that each department has its own numbers because it's not the same across all departments. And they look at those AAMC, and we encourage the departments to negotiate the level of the AAMC with their faculty.
I've looked over the AAMC numbers, and our salaries are like the 5th to 10th percentile.
Well, that's terrible. Which department are you in? Pediatrics, yes. That's unfortunately is true.
You're higher than some other pediatric academic institutions, believe it or not.
But his question is pertinent.
In Southern California, they're all like that. It's just California.
Pediatrics, in fact, the pediatrics, family medicine, psychiatry has a much lower AAMC numbers. Let's talk about the Z for a minute. The Z really only affects individuals, most of the time it only affects individuals in the clinical comp status. And it's supposed to be contribution above and beyond your primary responsibility in the TNS. So if you work a little bit more and you get more money and you pay your taxes to the department, and each department has a different taxation system, then you're able to get the Z. And usually you can get the Z every 2 months as a check after the taxation is. That's why I mentioned earlier that individuals that are able to live without 1/12 of their check, when they move it to the Z, they get a benefit because the taxation on the Z, most of the time, is lower than the taxation on the Y. Psychiatry, as an example, the taxation on the Z is 5% lower than the Y. So you get a little bit more return on your Z than if you are putting all your money in your Y. So that's really what the Z is. The Z is every 2 months, I get a report from the department requesting payment of Z to the faculty. We do 2 things immediately. One, we check the status of the practice plan to see if, in fact, what they're asking for us to distribute is true. The money is already in the bank. It's after the fact. And then the administration signs that this money is there, and then I sign for it, and then it gets out in a check. Sometimes it's every 2 months. Some departments it's quarterly, depending on what you do. Now, the Z is a very complicated system because let's use the Department of Medicine as an example. Department of Medicine has a structure where the Z is based on RVUs. So if you do a certain number of RVUs, you're paid a certain number depending on whether you're the 50th percentile of the AMC, AAMC in RVUs, and you get a bigger number if you are on the 75th percentile, and you get a bigger number on the 90th percentile. And that number changes based on how many RVUs that you have. In psychiatry, it's a simple formula. Any money that you earn above your TNS, you get as a Z minus tax. There's no formula. You get every dollar that you earn above and beyond what you negotiated for. So because the Department of Medicine practice plan is a joint effort. They pool the money, and they divide it, not just by individual, but what I said, by the RVU values. So it's not just the effort of one individual, it's also a collective effort, and then divided as a reward to the faculty that did more than the others. In psychiatry, it is an individual person by individual person. So the Z is a very different system in each department. And I'm sure, oh, by the way, there is a practice plan, policies and procedure and bylaws for each department. You're entitled to see it, and you're entitled to know how the Z is figured and paid. Yes, sir.
The Z doesn't vary from division to division?
It varies from division to division. Yes, absolutely. Excuse me?
It just seems arbitrary.
Well, again, that's why I mentioned the bylaws of the practice plan. Because in divisions, in pediatrics, I know that as a fact. In some divisions, they have a formula that says the first number of dollars or percentage of all the dollars collected goes to the division for academic enrichment or doing something with it. And the rest is distributed. So it is division to division, department to department. Yes, sir.
You mentioned something about shifting your pay from like a Z proportion to Y or Y
Yeah.
depending to be maximally beneficial to me. Who does that? Do I?
Yeah, but before I confirm that statement, but for individuals that have their earnings pooled, that might not be a great idea. If you are in a practice plan where it is individual by individual earnings, that makes sense. But if your earnings are pooled and you're only paid by a formula, you might lose out. So you can get, so it's answering your specific question, it's the departmental administrator, finance administrator.
But can I move money from X to Y or Y to X?
No. The X and X prime is fixed. You can't move from X and X prime because, again, it is the driving force behind your retirement. So it has to be the way it is. But you can definitely move Y. But again, be careful not to move Y dollars before you know if your Z payments is based on individual effort or group effort. Because then it makes a difference. Yes, sir.
I think our chief was told last year that you could only pay a certain proportion of Z and salary. You had to spend the rest on fellow enrichment or something else. Is that in practice?
Well, again, let me make it clear. Every practice plan, it starts, okay, let's go backwards. There is an umbrella practice plan that covers all the university. There's a School of Medicine practice plan that covers the School of Medicine. There's a departmental practice plan that covers departments. The department's practice plan can be more than the schools, but not less than the requirements of the school, and the same as the university. So in some departments, the practice plan guidelines and rules that govern the Z distribution are very specific. They say, we will take 30% off the top. In fact, even in psychiatry, when I said individual, we take 8% of every dollar earned for what's called academic enrichment. And that academic enrichment in psychiatry is really paying the residents' salaries right now.
I guess I have trouble interpreting the practice plan report because it subtracts out all those lines that are paid to the dean's office and the various overhead, and then it leaves you with the final bottom line. But at the end of the year, you still only get a proportion of that.
But let's talk about what's subtracted, because that's very important. Each department has a set of subtractions based on how much we pay for the billing department, how much we pay for the dean's tax. The dean's tax is it's a mandatory thing that we take from each department. And then it has, again, subtraction based on a tax that could be for academic enrichment, as I described for psychiatry and so on. After this is done, and then there is a number, then the division could have in its bylaws that are voted by the faculty, by the way. The bylaws don't come down by a fiat that says this is what it is. The faculty votes in any changes of the bylaws. Now, once you join a department that has already an established bylaws and there's no requirement to change, then that's what you join the department as. But if the department wants to change the bylaws, they're able to, with a majority vote, change the bylaws. So the division then might have the bylaws, in your case, that says, after all the things are subtracted, we will take 20% for fellow salaries. As I said, in psychiatry, we take 8%, and because of the cuts over the years in resident salaries from the institution, from 1900, we now fund most of the resident salaries. The portion that comes from 1900 now is coming from practice plan. Yes, please.
When you talk about deciding X and Y versus Z, does that affect your retirement? If it
No, you have to focus again. The retirement treaty is only based on X and X prime.
Oh, okay, all right.
It has nothing to do with Y.
Okay, all right, fine.
Nothing to do with Y.
Okay.
But it's important, as I said, mentioned, X and X prime is not discussable. You have that value. It's what your X is, step and rank, and what your APU is, step and rank. Academic Program Unit.
Okay.
So you should know.
I haven't found out what that is.
Oh, I hope you know. Your department should tell you what program what department are you in?
Medicine?
Well, medicine has like 2 or 3 APUs.
Oh, okay.
Some are at 0.3 and some are at 0.5. I can't tell you what yours is.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know what to tell you. Not that I can't tell you. I don't know what to tell you.
Find out.
You have to find out. Because it's an important number.
Okay.
It's an important number to know. Yeah. Are you a basic scientist?
No.
No. So you should know. Because, again, if you're a basic scientist, it's at 0.3. If it's clinical, it could be 0.3, it could be 0.5. I don't know. What else? Yes?
Coming back to the vested
Yes.
subject, you talked about years of service. Does that include both part-time and full-time?
Well, part-time will collect as a percentage. So let's say you worked 4 years as half-time, it's now 2 years of service credit. Yeah, so part-time depends on what part-time you are, and it's calculated as a percentage of the year.
On that score, can you talk a little bit about, are there anybody here that works part-time at the VA or county?
That's a very important question, because now we have very specific criteria for that. In the past, and we shouldn't really dwell on the past, people used to be able to have 2 jobs, funded by the VA and funded by UCLA. Right now, that's not possible. The retirement, if you're getting retirement from the VA, that's where you're going to get your retirement mostly, and you will get only retirement from UCLA for the portion of funds that we pay you from UCLA. Now, in the negotiation process for the VA people, we do what's called direct pay. So we list it as part of your TNS, but you get a check from the federal government VA. But it's listed in your check as a reportable item in your TNS, but in your check, that's not listed because you're getting it already from the VA. And the retirement is based on, again, what the VA pays you, they have the retirement system, and what UCLA pays you, they have their own retirement system. The county is the same thing, percentage times. Yes?
So this may be an unfair question, but can you give examples of other sources of Z that are not necessarily clinical, maybe teaching positions,
Yeah, it's important. And I'm going to use examples that are not universal. In some departments, they use the Z payments to pay for a specific job. And that we call it direct Z, fixed Z. Why do they do that? We have an individual that is doing something for the department. The department wants to help that individual. And we use the sources of income that we have in our practice plan that we've collected from our taxation system, and we pay the faculty member a fixed Z for a specific role. That's for departments that are not able to use other sources. The fixed Z is a mechanism. Now, the fixed Z is then not negotiated based on what you do work-wise as far as clinical earnings recouping, but really work-wise as far as a fixed job.
Are the Z payments
Yes.
Or like tax at a higher rate?
No, I don't think so. No, no. You will, when you get your W-2, the Z payment is included in it. It's a one payment from the university.
Can you address consulting?
Yeah. Well, in fact, I am going to be there's a memo. Everybody of you got orientated. There's a memo in the orientation package that tells you what you can keep and what you can't keep and so on. But I'm going to upgrade it. So consulting fees is a reportable item. So you have to report the consulting fees. And you have to put it into your practice plan and get it as... So this is another example of a Z that you can put it in and get it as a Z payment, as a consulting fee. But it's reportable, meaning that you can't just keep it. You have to report that you got it. You have to put it in the practice plan and then get it after the fact. Now, the reason I'm going to be sending out the memo, upgraded memo from what I sent last year is this. In the past, we used to be able to say to people, to be safe, ask the people that are giving you the check, either from drug companies or somewhere else, to write the check to the Regents of the University of California and not have it written to you personally. Because the drug companies and all these other places are now required by law that just passed to post every dollar they give you in the newspapers. Anything above $50 is posted. They now have to track it. So they really cannot track it to the Regents. They have to track it to the individual. So the new adjustment that we're going to be making in the memo is to say they have to write the check to you, and you have to sign it to the Regents. Be responsible to report it and sign it to the Regents so that they can fulfill their obligation to report it to the agencies. This is Grassley, Senator Grassley put this law in, and now we have to do that. Yes?
Can the department then say, well, we're taking that to cover your X and Y?
Well, you would want it to cover that X and Y if you need it.
Oh, okay. All right.
About the external activity fees.
About what?
You're talking about the consulting.
Yes.
Some smaller income, like you go to invite to conference.
No. We differentiated consulting from lectures. If you're giving a lecture and you get an honorarium for it, we allow you to keep it. I'm talking about consulting in the big C. Yes, sir.
So, as a fellow right now, I have to, we talked about pension, but I contribute to a DCP.
Yeah.
Do we do that as part of the XYZ as well, the defined contribution plan as well?
The DCP is saved for you in the same system,
Okay.
but it's separate from what I described as your pension. In fact, if you leave the system, you get the DCP back.
Right.
Yes?
So I just wanted to ask you next final things that you could easily look up, but is there some way to know how much people in your department at your rank are generally paid? Do you
Yeah.
have an idea of where to start your investigation?
That's a very important question. In fact, I review each practice plan submission by each department to look at two things. Equity among everybody in step and rank. And equity doesn't mean dollar for dollar. Equity means a range. And then gender equity. We make a special effort to look at, is there equity between genders to see if that is fair distribution. And again, it's not dollar for dollar, but we make a big effort to make it equal. And then we encourage the departments to go back again and look at resources that they have at their disposal. First, we ask the faculty members themselves. I'm going to describe psychiatry because I do their practice plan. I send a letter out to people that are not in the range of equity, and I say, you have the option, if you have resources, to get an increase in what you negotiated. And they come back to me and say, okay, I'd like to negotiate another $5,000. And we approve that. But then if they don't have the resources themselves, we ask the divisions or the department itself to make an effort to come up with some resources to fulfill that equity formation. But you're entitled to go back to your academic administrator. They won't give you names, but they will give you a spread of where you stand. Yes, please. Well, assistant professor, I hope they will not be retiring. Because you'll have a problem.
Like in the future. I mean, whatever rank. I mean, I just gave you.
Well, let's use something very simple. So, a professor, I think we need to have another pen. Supposedly, professors have the chance to retire better than assistant professors. So at the time of the retirement, their X was 100,000, okay? And they're an APU of 0.5. So we have another 50 here. So they have 150 as their basis for their factor. And let's make their age, years of service, years of service. They have 20 years of service. Okay? So then we're going to multiply this, by the 150, times, because they are now 65 years old or 60 years old, they have a factor of 2.5. So you multiply this by this, so that's 50%, right? 20 times 2.5 is 50%, if you have a calculator or quicken math, times the 150. So you will retire getting $75,000 from the university's pension. Okay? And this table is also part of the system. So you can find out by years of age years what the percentage here is. Yes, please.
I think you said it, but I was thinking about what determines why clinical service?
Effort. What you're working.
That's subjective then.
Yes. It is a negotiated amount that's negotiated. I'll use an example that's concrete that I know. In psychiatry, as an example, we negotiate the Y based on, for the clinical series, based on historical perspective of how much clinical activities they had in the previous 6 months, and have they met that obligation. And could they continue to perform at that level? Because when we negotiate a Y, the department is responsible to give that individual 1/12 of that Y, irrespective of what they do. So we want to make sure that they're able to collect that money. The Z is much safer because it's after the fact. Did I answer your example? And this increases by this number and increases by this number. And this number is in the table from 2 to 2.5. It's a very important number because, as you know, the multiplier makes a big difference.
Can you comment on deficits?
Yeah. So I just mentioned a minute ago about being very careful in negotiating the Y because we don't want to have a deficit in the department or in the division based on what we already paid the faculty. And so we make sure when we calculate the negotiation for the following year that we do as much as we can, proper calculations, so we can give the individuals the Y. And that's why we like to give more in Z's than in Y. In some departments, the deficit is not covered. It's kind of carried from one year to the other. Hopefully, the next year they will do better. In some hardship cases, the deficit is covered by individuals if there is enough money in the bank to pay those individuals. In the bank, meaning the practice plan.
So what you're saying is that if the division is always in deficit, that you will never get a Y because the practice plan can't give it?
Well, no. If the division is always in deficit and you negotiated the Y, you get 1/12 of the Y, whether that's the problem for that division. But you might not get a Z. They might hold a Z based on the fact that they don't have money to pay your Z. That's a big problem for some divisions. Yeah. Lynn, did you?
Oh, sorry, just something you mentioned about being able to get a printout of.
Not a printout. You go to your administration and ask, can you give me a little bit of idea about where I stand in the average in my step and rank? Yeah, and they will be able to give you an email or something, but I don't think they'll give you a printout.
Do we have other questions? Everybody totally clear now where all this comes from?
And if it isn't, you can come and see me.
I want to thank Fawzy for...
Thank you very much.
It's a complex topic that often we
It is
don't
complex.
always understand. But I think what's really important is to realize that your salary comes from you, comes from the activities
Most of the time.
that you generate, with the exception of the state funds. So you are generating funds through grants or through contracts or through clinical care, and that's what's going into making up your salary structure. And I want to thank Fawzy. If you have
You're
any
welcome.
questions, feel free to contact him. And remember, our faculty lecture series next month will happen both on Tuesday and Wednesday. And please fill out the evaluations of today's session, as well as suggestions for future sessions, because this lecture series is based on what you want, and the only way we know what you want is for you to tell us. Thank you so much. Thank you, Fawzy.
Thank you very much.